answer. So let's jump into it. So today's session is all about inclusive design and marketing. So let's kick off. So here we have a little intro to me. So who am I? Where have I come from? So I'm a chronically ill person. I have learned all the information that I'm going to share with you through lived experience and through amazing friends. I'm an advocate for disability. I have more diagnosis than days of the week at this point. So a lot of different things going on, and I've had a lot of lived experience of other people in my network with other disabilities. So I consider myself quite well-rounded. I run my own business and I also run my own blog. So my blog talks a lot about advocacy and disability and life with chronic illness, whereas the business is Inkfire. So this is an entirely disabled-led marketing company. We do marketing and tech, and we help business owners to get on track with accessibility. So everything that we do is really built around empathy, flexibility, and just around making work that works for people, but also work that supports people with their dreams. So a bit of a mix of everything. Right, let me just flick on. There we go. So let's jump into the actual presentation itself. So I want to just break things down from the beginning and start off with, what does disabled-led actually mean? So I think a lot of us have heard terms like disability inclusive or accessible, but disabled-led kind of goes a step further than that. So it's not just about including disabled people in the actual conversation, but it's about putting them in the driving seat and letting them dictate what happens. So disabled-led really means that people are leading on the work, making the decisions, setting the priorities, and shaping the creative direction, kind of designing the systems that are in place. So an example of how that might look is within my company at Inkfire, our entire project management system was built to support people with fluctuating health. So it's not just a box product that's designed to be one size fits all. You turn up, you use it, you go, and if it doesn't fit you, then oh dear. Instead, it's designed to actually accommodate the things that we know that our users need and things that they themselves have identified would be helpful. So that might be things like flexible deadlines, maybe it's remote collaboration tools, or the ability to all work together on a project rather than it being very separate. But that has unified us and meant that we can all work so much more in sync with each other, even though we're all working at different times of day. Whereas a disabled inclusive business might just consult disabled people, but they may not actually get them in and get them in the heart of what they're doing. A disabled-led business is creating everything from the inside out, and inclusion is automatic because we're designing it ourselves. When disabled people lead on marketing and design, it means that they change the narrative around what we're doing. So we go from being just inspiring stories or people that might at some point need something to being the authentic, empowered representation. So one of the quotes that stood out from a recent talk I did with Small Business Britain, very similar to this one, was actually that we're not your inspiration, we're your competition. So it's moving people out of being the people on the horizon that is like, oh, well, we could design this and it might help that person, into making it, no, we're going to create this system because people on an everyday basis are using it. We're in the workplace, we're the competition, let's make it work for us. So then when we go on to the next section, we're talking about the fact that inclusive marketing is not just a trend. So you've probably noticed lately that lots of brands seem to be using words like inclusive or accessible. And sometimes it can just feel like another thing that everybody's talking about that's going around on social media, on TikTok, is a bit of a fad. But actually, there are so many reasons why inclusion isn't going to be a passing trend. It's something that's only very recently been picked up on, which is why it seems to be a bit of a hype at the moment. But going into 2026, we're really at a point where accessibility can no longer be an afterthought. 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled, so that's millions of potential customers, clients, employees, and people that can make decisions that could be interacting with your business or your brand. The purple pound, which is disabled spending power in the UK, is worth 274 billion annually. So that's an awful lot of money that we could be tapping into in your business. Accessibility is often seen as an expense, but it's actually one of the smartest investments that you could ever make. When you invest in inclusion, you're building systems, content, and loyalty that keep paying off because accessible design doesn't just help disabled users, but it improves usability for everybody universally. One of my favorite examples is in reference to SEO on a website. So, did you know that if you optimize your website for accessibility, you're also automatically making it more inclusive? And you're also helping Google to be able to find it more easily. There's more about this in the second half, and it's one of my keen interests. But Google, if you think about it, can't see your website. It's basically visually impaired. So, by making something accessible for a group of people, you're also making it accessible to Google. Like I say, though, more on that in the second half. So, really, inclusion isn't about just ticking a box, it's about becoming commercially smart. And it's not just a good practice, but it's becoming a legal expectation under the Equality Act. So, building accessibility into your brand now, whether it's small and going to grow or whether it's already established and needs to grow more, is all about future proofing your brand, protecting it, and helping you to harness the power of the purple pound and actually get people that otherwise may not be purchasing into your business. When brands build accessibility and representation into their marketing, they're opening doors to a whole new audience. So that means more reach, more loyalty, more trust. Because people will remember how your brand makes them feel, and if your marketing excludes them, they'll remember that as well. Trends tend to come and go, and hashtags fade, algorithms change, but inclusion lasts because it's rooted in respect. It's all about representation, human connection, and things that you want your brand to be associated with. So, thinking about inclusive marketing is a very interesting statistic. So, did you know that 75% of disabled people leave businesses due to a lack of accessibility? When you think about that, that's crazy. You know, this could be a physical shop, it could be your website, it could be your booking system, or your social media page. Let me give you a little example of this. So, I've got a visually impaired friend who once told me that she stopped shopping at Next. And the reason she stopped shopping at Next was because not of the prices of the products or the quality of the products, but because she couldn't trust the product that she was buying. Their website had no alt text, so she wasn't able to get a good description of the products that she was trying to purchase. It didn't explain to her what packaging it was going to come in. It didn't talk about the size. It didn't talk about the quantity. So she was having to essentially just go in and blind buy products without knowing what they were. An example of one of the alt texts was it just said photo of product rather than explaining what the gift set actually looked like. The fact that it came packaged, ready to go, that it had a ribbon on it, that it contained multiple products. She didn't have any of that information. And in the end, she got very frustrated and said that she couldn't confidently add something to basket if she didn't really know what she was buying. So she felt completely shut out, and she said she would never shop at that company until they fixed those issues. Just think of how much time and energy she's had to waste on looking at that, trying to work out where she can shop, because unfortunately it's not the only place that she's found that. How frustrated she is when she gets there, and then the fact that she's going to make a U-turn. That company are just completely losing out on a huge amount of profits and on her doing potentially all of her shopping there. So, inclusive marketing isn't just like a feel-good extra, it's a fundamental part of building a brand. So, if your brand is excluding people, you're going to get frustration, you're going to get people just doing a complete U-turn and not coming back. And that's not what we want. So, we're going to be talking about how to build accessibility and good inclusivity into your business so that you can productively go away and utilize that. So, Sorry, I flicked a bit too far. So, when it comes to inclusive marketing, it's not just about ticking a box. We aren't just looking to be compliant. We aren't just looking to do the bare basics. We're looking to remove the friction, the frustration away from real people and make a noticeable difference. We see lots of businesses still thinking of accessibility as something that you need to add in at the end, but that's just not the way it works. Accessibility needs to be built in as you go. If you're only building it in at the end, it's a bit like doing a patch-up job on a house. You can build a house one way, but then if you decide that you want to completely remodel it, it's either a massive job to do it properly, or you can end up not doing so great of a job, and you can still kind of see through the cracks where an old wall was or where an old window was. You need to do the job properly so that it helps everybody. Otherwise, you're still going to be able to see through it and know that it wasn't really custom built and it's not going to really be fit for purpose. True accessibility isn't something that you can just sprinkle on the top of a finished project. It's something that you sort of have to plan in from the beginning. So you wouldn't build the walls of a house, finish the interior design, and then say, oh, wait, maybe we should add a front door. Accessibility is the door. It's how people actually get in and experience what you've made. So if you don't plan it from the beginning, you'll spend far more time and money trying to go in and retrofit it, and you don't want that. When you start with accessibility in mind, you make smarter decisions at every stage. You choose colours with contrast that still look beautiful. You write alt text while you upload the images, not 6 months later. And you think about font size, layout, and readability as part of the brand. You don't just have to compromise on it later. And the best part is that when you design accessibly, it benefits everyone. Clear text helps people with dyslexia, but it also helps someone reading their phone in bright sunlight. Captions might help hearing impaired viewers, but they also help everyone who's watching your video on mute. When accessibility is built in from the outset, you don't have to fix exclusion because you've designed it right in the first place, and so you can adapt, you don't have to adapt it to then make it better. That's what inclusive by design really means. Are you going to hit it right every time? Absolutely not. But accessibility is continually evolving, and with every update to technology and advancement in understanding, the aim isn't just a one and done approach, but it's ongoingly to have the systems in place to support people and to help them to adapt as needed. So sometimes people think of accessibility like a restriction, as if it limits your creativity, but actually the constraints are where the creativity can thrive. When we design with accessibility in mind, we're not narrowing down our options, but we're sharpening our thinking. Think about some of the most creative design breakthroughs. Captions. They were originally designed for hearing impaired viewers, but now they help people to watch videos everywhere and anywhere, whether that's silently on the train, maybe while they're holding their baby, while they're sleeping. Captions are a lifesaver for all of us. We use them on a daily basis. Voice assistants like Siri were born from accessibility tech, but now most of us on a day-to-day basis use it to make shopping lists, set alarms for ourselves, or just have reminders of things. Curb cuts on pavements were created for wheelchair users, but they now help parents with pushchairs, travellers with suitcases, and delivery drivers. All of these innovations came from designing for access first. In marketing, the exact same thing applies. When you write clear, inclusive copy, it connects with more people, not fewer. When you use high contrast colours, your message stands out better. And when you caption your videos, you massively increase your engagement. So, accessibility isn't about limitation, it's about unlocking better ideas. The world often says, we'll accommodate, but what does that actually mean? Well, usually it's something along the lines of, we'll make a special exception so that you can participate. But empowerment says, we designed this so that you can lead, choose, and belong without asking. When businesses make that mindset shift, accessibility stops feeling like a patch and it just becomes good modern design. So I just popped together some examples for you of what this might actually look like in some campaigns that I've really enjoyed. So one was Apple's The Greatest campaign. So this showed how average different built-in accessibility features within Apple's products benefit people with disabilities, but they also benefit average everyday people. This ad was really good for showing how not to pity people, but actually shows how the massive usability of Apple's products has increased what people can do on a day to day. It's very worth watching. It's on YouTube. I recommend it as a bit of homework. Another one was Nike's Fly Ease trainers. So these were born of a disabled customer writing to Nike and saying that they couldn't access the trainers, that they wanted to be able to wear them like everyone else could, but they were unable to physically get them onto their feet because of mobility issues. So Nike turned around and designed these incredible trainers that basically put themselves on. If you put your foot into them, they just kind of automatically bend and fit. And so all of a sudden they became really sleek and desirable. You saw fitness people and, celebrities wanting to get a hold of them. So something that started out from accessibility became super popular and fashionable. You also have Lego's Braille bricks. So this really just helps children to normalize Braille in average day-to-day play. It's been useful in classrooms, it's been useful for play workers in hospitals, and it's just made inclusion fun and joyful. It's helped parents to start the conversation about Braille, what it is and who it benefits. And it's just become a really fun way to interact. My personal favourite is in Lego. Again, they're really winning. They've got a character now with a stoma bag, which is the same as I myself have. And I got very excited when I was playing with my friend's children and I noticed that one of the characters has a stoma bag. It's just normalised disability, it's made it part of every day, and it now comes in lots and lots of the play sets. So you don't have to specifically seek out disability in order to see inclusion. So, what can we learn from all of this? Well, it's a key phrase that you hear a lot in the disabled community, nothing for us without us. Basically, if you want to be more inclusive and you want to build your brand to fit people who have varying needs, you need to build it with them, not for them. So bring them into the heart of what you do. So just before we take a quick hot beverage break, I wanted to recap on everything that we've covered so far. So we've looked at what it really means to be disabled led, which doesn't mean just inviting disabled people to the table, but letting disabled people take the lead on work and shape the systems. We've touched on the fact that inclusion isn't just a passing trend, but it's actually a business investment and it's something that's going to help you in the future. How inclusive marketing is more than just a nice to have, and how accessibility from the get-go, planning the door before you build the house, helps your business. We've also reframed accessibility as creativity, seeing constraints not as the limits, but as the sparks for innovation. So if there's one theme that's running throughout all of this, it's empowerment. Moving from just accommodating disabled people and ticking boxes to designing experiences that let people lead and belong. So in the next part of the talk, I'm going to give some practical, actionable steps on what you can do to harness the power of inclusion, even starting today. But first, it's time for a cup of tea. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Like I said, section two is a little bit more practical. Get a pen and paper if you don't already have one. Hopefully, you got a hot drink and you're ready now to hear some information on what you can practically do to make a difference and build in some of these theories that we've gone through and make them a reality. So, we're going to talk about collaborating with disabled creators. It's something I'm just going to touch on. I could talk about this for hours and hours. But it's very, very important. So let's get into it. So, one of the biggest shifts that we can make in marketing is to stop thinking of disabled people as just the subjects of campaigns. We are the creators, the decision makers, and the experts. And so we have a lot to bring to the table outside of just being the center point of a campaign. Representation in front of the camera does absolutely matter, but representation behind the camera is what really changes how our stories are told. When disabled people play a part of a creative team, whether they're the writers, the designers, the videographers, the strategists, that's when the authenticity really comes through and it brings it to life. When you do work with disabled creators, it's really important to pay them fairly. Don't pay an exposure, don't cut rates just because someone works from home, and don't assume that access adjustments are some kind of favour. They're part of really good project management. If your collaboration isn't accessible, you'll lose so many brilliant voices along the way. So think about what that actually means. Flexible timelines, clear written briefs, captioned meetings. Maybe it's alt text shared in assets, communication that doesn't rely on last minute phone calls. Some of the most powerful campaigns come from lived experience because disabled creators understand the nuance, the humour, and the reality in ways that no brand guidelines or ChatGPT ever could. Going back to the statistic that we referenced earlier, 75% of disabled people leave businesses because of accessibility. Now, imagine for a second that they see your campaign and it stops them in their tracks. Because imagine how quickly and how much more fully and hard they're going to engage with that because it really fits and appeals to them. So, if you're wondering how to start, here's a few steps. First of all, audit who's in the room when you plan a campaign. Whose voices are missing? What gaps are there? Who is it not appealing to? For example, the company that we referenced earlier, that my friend mentioned, Next, who don't have an accessible website for the purposes of shopping. So if people can't go to Next to purchase an item, where else are they going? Who are they looking at? What are they going to be after? What frustrations are they going to feel by that point? And how can you alleviate them? That's a really good thing to think about. Number two, build accessibility into your creative budget. So captions, BSL interpretation, image descriptions. There's a whole variety of different things that this might be, but it's really important that you have a budget of both time and finances to be able to work this in to what you're doing. Like we said earlier, it's an investment. Number three, create accessible briefing templates and feedback forms so that everyone can contribute. You want everyone to have a part in making the decision for what the project's going to be and how it's going to run, and you want everyone to have the ability to share with you how it's going and not to get blocked just because they can't even get involved with the feedback. So, I also want to talk briefly about something which we're seeing more and more in accessibility and something that I'm seeing on a daily basis at work, which I call performative accessibility. There's been a huge rise in companies suddenly claiming to do accessibility, offering one-click fixes or plugins that promise to make things like your website compliant overnight. But accessibility really isn't something that you can buy. It's a process and it takes understanding, testing, and lived experience. If your brand isn't accessible at its core, no one-step solution is going to fix that. Often these tools can actually make things worse, particularly for those using assistive tech. It can break screen readers and it can mean that you're just patching up a much bigger problem all the time, which means that it breaks frequently. If someone emails you promising your website will become accessible with just one click, please run. Accessibility isn't like a Netflix subscription. You can't just sign up and hope for the best. We've audited sites where clients have paid hundreds, if not thousands, for so-called accessibility plugins, only for disabled people to still be completely blocked from using the site. The quick fixes often create a false sense of compliance, and that's dangerous because people think, well, that's it, I've done it. So if you're ever approached by a company that's promising instant accessibility, please ask them a few key questions. Who's on the team? Are disabled people involved? Do they test with real disabled users? How do they measure success? What happens when technology changes? And how do they evolve? If they can't answer those questions clearly, they're not selling accessibility. they're selling convenience. And that's not the kind of investment that you want to make because unfortunately, it will very quickly not pay off. So I completely lost the point in my notes, but never mind. That's exactly why you need to think about what you're planning accessibility wise into your business. You need to have a long-term strategy with it. And you need to make sure that you're not just ticking boxes, but you're designing systems that actually work. If you're feeling out of your depth, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like you don't know how to go about this, that's where you seek help. And the best people to seek the help from are real disabled people. It's like with what we do at Inkfire, we approach accessibility from both sides of the table, the lived experience and the technical expertise. It sort of comes together, and that's what you need. You need people that truly live and breathe it. Just having something that's a quick solution isn't going to support that. So now thinking about accessibility in digital marketing, again, we've said that this isn't just one big tick box. It's a set of small, consistent habits that make your online presence more usable, visible, and human. It's not one and done. It's ongoing and evolving. What's really interesting is that everything that I'm about to share in terms of practical tips doesn't just make your content more inclusive, it also makes it perform better. And I'm going to explain how and why. So let's start with your website. Your website is your digital shopfront. If it's not accessible, it's like having a beautiful, beautiful shop with a broken door. So we need to start with the basics. Does your website use clear, logical headings? Things like H tags in the proper order. This is to do with the structure of how you set up the site at its fundamentals. Is it set up right? Does your website have alt text that describes the purpose, the nuances, etc., not just the appearance? It's really important that you're not just describing that something is an image and that you're not just describing image of bottle of milk. It needs to have more context than that. It needs to actually tell somebody what it is that they're not seeing visually. If it's meant to make you laugh, if it's meant to make you cry, if there's maybe something in it that you need to spot, that is all information that you should be including in the alt text. Make sure that your color contrast is meeting the standards. So black text on very pale grey might look elegant, but it's unreadable for most people. You need to think about if you're mixing red and green and people who are colorblind. There's lots and lots that goes into that. But if your core brand is accessible, you're making everything more accessible. And don't forget that form fields also need to have a clear label. Now, when you think about it, when you make something inclusive, you're making it accessible to Google because, like I touched on earlier, Google is essentially blind. It has no eyes, it cannot see your content, it doesn't know what you're posting about unless you tell it. So when Google crawls your website the same way that a screen reader does, is it able to understand what you're pushing, what information you're sharing? If it is, it will then be able to understand it better and it will know exactly who to then market it to. Whereas if your website is full of alt text that says photo and full of decorative things just labeled as decorative, it's not going to know what it's looking at. So we need to try and use keywords that are important to the subject that you're talking about. Let's touch on social media because I feel like this is a really underharnessed platform. So social media is one of the biggest opportunities for inclusion as there's next to no features built in automatically to push it. So what are some things that you can do with your social media to improve it? Well, you can add captions to every single video, not just for hearing impaired viewers, but for people who might be watching it on mute, like we said earlier, maybe they're traveling or just can't have the volume up. You can use camel case in hashtags. So camel case is when you capitalize the first letter of each word so that a screen reader can read it properly. So you want it to be like on screen, Small Business Britain with capital SBB, not all one word, all lowercase. You can add image descriptions to your captions as well. This is for images, but it can also be for videos. Describe what's happening, what might get missed. Describe any nuances, like I said, if it's funny, if it's sad, if it's silly, describe that. And you can also avoid using text-heavy graphics that can't be read by screen readers. So if you put text into a graphic and then you export it and you put it somewhere, if somebody is using a screen reader, it won't be able to read that text. So it's really important to just add a little explanation underneath. And remember that inclusive content will also perform better. Captions increase engagement, image descriptions increase reach, and clarity increases connection. When Google or Instagram or TikTok or whatever platform understand what it is that you're sharing, it's able to share it better, more effectively, which gets you out there to more people. All those stats that we chase, like clicks, likes, watch time, they all improve when the content's accessible. So, emails, that's another big one. We send them constantly. We get pinged 1,000 emails a day, but we rarely think about accessibility. Simple tweaks can make a big difference. Remember to always use real text. So, like we said, don't put text into graphics. Make your link text descriptive, so not click here, but read our autumn fragrance guide. Keep paragraphs short and use very clear headings and watch your color contrast, especially on buttons. You need them to be very clear. If your brand guidelines already give you the color palette that you can use, then you don't have to worry. But if you're winging it email to email, there's something to bear in mind. If your email feels easy to read and navigate, people are more likely to open the next one and the next one, which means that accessibility will then build trust and retention. Accessibility should be part of your brand identity, not something that you retrofit. So if we think about branding for just a second, it really is the core of what you do. So if you already have a brand, I would encourage you to go back and review it. And if it's something that you haven't created yet, definitely factor these things into your brand strategy. When you're designing, think about checking your color palette. Like we said, making sure the contrast is high enough and making sure that all the colors work together. Pick fonts that are clear and readable. Certain fonts are much more difficult for people who are dyslexic to be able to read, or for certain sizing, it might be difficult to identify, so check that out. Make sure that your text scale well for mobile use. Again, you want to make sure it's very visible at a very small size. And keep your animations subtle and give users control in spaces like your website. You want them to be able to say whether or not they can tolerate the movement and the animations. Good design and accessible design are the same thing, because if your brand only looks beautiful when it's inaccessible, it's not good design. It's just exclusive design. So we want to build accessibility into our workflow, not just our output. So when you're thinking about planning content, this might mean including feedback on your website so that you can keep tweaking what you do. Testing campaigns with disabled users before launch, even if that's just a few of your friends. See if you can send out something that you've done, get their feedback and hear what they say and make changes accordingly. And use checklists to make sure that every post meets the minimum standards. So make sure it's got alt text, make sure it's got a visual description, make sure the hashtags are camel cased. There's lots and lots of things that you can add onto this best practice list to make sure that everything you push out is as close to accessible as it can be. Accessibility in digital marketing is really about one simple principle. If everyone can find you, understand you, and use what you make, you win. That's the aim. Accessibility doesn't make your audience smaller, but it makes your impact much, much bigger. Now, I just very briefly wanted to touch on running a business with a chronic illness. I know firsthand that accessibility isn't just a nice idea. I wouldn't be able to do what I do or work if I didn't do it in a way that suited me. It's what allows my team to thrive because we built systems that flex with us, not against us, and we don't work the typical 9 to 5. We don't force ourselves into structures that weren't made with us in mind, and we don't create invisible hurdles. Instead, we try to work with ourselves, with how we know we function best, with good days, bad days, energy waves, and rest breaks. And that's really the heart of inclusive design. It's not just for your customers, but it's for your people and your team. It isn't just about captions or color contrast, it's about creating careers that are sustainable and giving you the tools and the flexibility to show up, even when things get complicated. You might be working from the hospital, you might be working from bed, you might be working on your laptop somewhere. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter because the systems that you built can support that. It's really about creating longevity, sustainability, and making sure that you're working in a way that you can manage to do for more than just a day or two. People with disabilities have so much to bring to the table in terms of skills, knowledge, and resources. They just need that space in which to thrive. So inclusion shouldn't just be a brand value that you paste somewhere on your website and forget about. It should be at the heart of your business strategy and it should be the blueprint for what you do. Remember that a good business is a sustainable business that works for you. So as a business owner, think about what you need and create strategies to fit around that. So I've talked for a lot today, and if you're still here, thank you for still listening. I am just going to wrap up by turning this whole talk and presentation into something that is actionable and that you can move forward with. So I've got a little bit of a list. So get your pens at the ready. So here are 5 simple steps that you can take as soon as you like with your marketing. Number 1, do an audit. Check your digital touch points, your websites, your socials, your emails, your brand materials, and see what's working and what isn't from an accessibility standpoint. 2, plan. Build accessibility into your next campaign or project. The earlier it's included, the easier and the cheaper that it is. 3, collaborate. Bring lived experience into your process. Partner with disabled creators, consultants, or agencies that understand accessibility in practice. I can make recommendations for just about anything and everything. So if there's something that you need, pop me a message and I will try and put you in touch with the right person. 4, test. Don't assume it's accessible just because it looks good. Ask disabled people for feedback and don't get upset if they give you feedback and it wasn't what you expected. Accessibility is ever evolving. It's good to have conversations, and there is nearly always something that you can tweak. Evolve, number 5. Accessibility isn't one and done. Keep reviewing, keep learning, keep growing. The more inquisitive you are, the more you open up the field for communication and conversation, the more amazing opportunities you'll find. Okay, that is me all done. So if anybody has any questions for me or anything you'd like to ask, feel free. And if you'd like to connect with me or, like I said,